Today on Thought Rock Live, we have Graham Furnis. Graham is a senior consultant with BeWise, and he's presenting Having a Second Look at a Service Catalog. Graham is fully immersed and passionate in providing ITSM solutions. He's a business-driven IT professional with 20-plus years of technology and management experience, and is certified as an ITIL manager and expert, as well as an accredited ITIL instructor. So, as Wanda mentioned, if there are any questions, please pose those in the question box, and I'll field those as we go through. That's enough from me for now. I will turn it right over to Graham.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, John, and thank you everyone for tuning in to our Thought Rock lunch series and our presentation today with the regarding the service catalog and having really two looks at it from the perspective of the service catalog itself and also looking at the perspective of the process. Right, ITIL is full of processes, and we definitely have a process for service catalog management. So, so we have a fairly short presentation just to kind of go over these concepts and add a bit more discussion around around all the key points today. But the essential thing is just understanding in our key learnings what the service catalog is and where it fits in your organization. Expanding that a bit further into its overall purpose, and then thinking about the catalog in your ITSM framework, where again you have lots of processes, and hopefully can kind of connect a few key concepts together today to give you good perspective and understanding of the catalog and its value. So where I typically like to start off in these presentations is in the service lifecycle itself. And just to have a bit of fun, John, I'm going to ask you, so from an ITIL life cycle diagram point of view, where do we find the service catalog management process and the catalog itself fit in the diagram? Where does it show up?
Let me look, Graham. I would say that we're probably looking at the service design component.
John, you're right. And for that, we will talk about the reward later on.
Perfect. 2 weeks from now.
There we go. So, so we're over here in service design, and we have our process service catalog management. So, so on the surface, it looks like very nice and neat. We have one place where the service catalog exists, and we have a place to manage it, and hopefully the presentation today expands upon that to give you a bit more perspective, which is always what I like to do with these presentations. But for now, we'll take it at face value that the service catalog is showing up in the design phase. So, and just a little reminder to make sure everyone is up. But service strategy is typically, in a life cycle where we want to start, followed by service design to design the strategic implementation of what we're going to be doing. Transition actually does all the build, test, implement, and then of course we can operate. And the catalog itself, I'm just talking randomly here, but the catalog, you can think of it as not just a process, but it's also something we're going to be building and delivering, which is going to go through this life cycle. So keep that in mind as we go through the remaining slides here. So I'm going to take us over to this slide. Clean up my screen a little bit. So basic definition for the service catalog can be one of two things: a database or a structured document. And the key thing is it's got customer information about all the live services that we're offering, and anything that we've approved to be offering and is coming down the pipe in the development cycle will be offered soon. Goes on to say that while you're describing these things, it would be very useful if we describe the characteristics about what these services will do for our customers, as well as let people know who's responsible for maintaining it and how do I get access. So a pretty simple definition, and here's one where you have to make a choice in an organization if you're starting off. Even if it's a structured document, PDF or anything down the road, you might want to start with the database at the beginning, or at least designing that kind of a structure, because depending upon how many things you have in your catalog, it can get quite complicated quite quick. And we'll come back and talk about this a bit more. But the whole purpose is, it's like any retail catalog or anything in sales, we're trying to tell our customers and our business, this is what we do, and this is how we've grouped everything together. So we'll add on now to the previous screen. We were talking about, I'll go back to it actually. So here we were talking about, I'm going to clean that up. There we go. Get rid of all those annotations. So, so we just said that before. We're only looking at the service catalog in the service catalog management process. But in fact, when you start reading into the ITIL books and when you start understanding how things are going or implemented, it actually ITIL talks about the service catalog, and it correctly does in multiple places. So we talk about it quite extensively in portfolio management. And of course, we have a process named after it. We talk about it within service catalog management. So as we keep on sort of unwrapping this, we'll see it's got a bigger scope. And that's where the presentation is kind of taking everyone today. The catalog is more than just a database or structured document, which we have back on this slide. It's actually, if I expand upon this one, it's much more strategic. Because anything you want to put in front of your customers, be it just internal business units, or you know, you have an IT service you're selling to external of the business, it's all strategic. And strategy is managed within the service portfolio. So it's very clear that in the service portfolio, all of these three things make up the definition of the portfolio. You have the, and just a quick definition of the diagram, you have the pipeline, in which you know, any new consideration for new services or changes that we might be doing but haven't yet approved and set into the development cycle. That's the pipeline. That's where we do all the strategic analysis. When you agree to do it, it can enter the catalog and you can start marketing it right away. And of course, don't forget, nothing lasts forever, so you need to take the old stuff out of our catalog or any initial assessments in the pipeline, and if we're not going to use it, we archive it in the retired part of the portfolio. So it's very critical, in my view, to think of the catalog as being strategic, because it's not just an ad hoc document. It can be, and there are certainly arguments to say, you know, it can be done that way. But it's really, you know, in a perfect world, it's more strategic because you are presenting something to the customers, and as we'll see, it sits in a very unique place in what you might be doing in your ITIL programs and in the overall workings of ITIL itself. So just covering a couple of points on the screen then. So the first portfolio bolded bullet point here. So the portfolio is the complete set of all services that we're managing, right? So again, those things being considered, those things being delivered or on the way, and anything we've done in the past, we can kind of learn from it. And all the decisions about what goes into the catalog or what comes out, it's all made up in strategy through service portfolio. So again, I'm going to go back and forth a few times today just to clarify it. So we've got two processes then that are very much involved with the catalog, the service catalog, and the decision making about what kind of catalog and what will go into it, how it's going to be presented to the customers and so on. That's a strategic decision up in portfolio management. So right up here in our strategy section. So we'll go on a bit further and we'll find out, so then what is service catalog management doing? We'll find out they're getting direction about how to go ahead and implement this catalog. So hopefully that gives everyone a bit of a thinking around the catalog to begin with. Again, as a document and a database, whatever you might be using, You've got a strategic element to it, and then you've got the actual, on the design side, the catalog management process here. You've got a process that deals with actually just trying to manage the catalog that's been up and running and published to my customers. So let's expand upon that with the next slide, just to kind of, again, clarify the concepts and give you a better idea about how to think about your catalog. So I'll go on to the slide following the previous one. So elaborating a bit more about the purpose and the overall combination of the service portfolio effort as a process and the service catalog management process. So key things for those who are quite up on their ITIL, and you recall the terms about, where does proper value get defined, or how does it get defined? It's defined with utility and warranty. So we need to, in our catalogs, because it's customer facing, we need to make sure we properly understand and define what kind of utility and warranty descriptions and requirements we're going to be delivering to our customers. And again, that's not something that service catalog management would do. It's not even something that really service portfolio management does. It goes to all the other ITIL processes in the strategy and design phase to get the proper business requirements and bring it back and start building up the overall service. So, this is actually the customer description that's easy to read of what we might be doing in a development project to build up a new service. And then we in IT, we build it back into our IT requirements. So over here in our diagram, from a business point of view, they want to know just the core information. So don't complicate your catalog for me. Just show me the core business service that I get, the critical utility and warranty things that I care about, and then you can make it more complicated within IT. So, so that's first of all the strategic decision about what goes into your catalog. Again, comes from portfolio, not from the catalog management process. It also shows the actual components that the customer gets. Right? It's great to have a description of what service is available. Hey, I have a new sales management service. Sounds fantastic. And how do I actually touch it? So is it a software installed on a PC? Is it coming through my mobile phone? We need to know those components. So your catalog has to have some basic technical information in there as well, at least the basic customer-facing components. And then this third piece here, where the comment is made that the catalog supports the sale and delivery of IT services. So if you have internal charging, right, you want to put that in your catalog. That's important information that customers need to know. How do you order it? That's a critical piece of information that customers need to know. How do I get support should something not work correct? How do I escalate if there's issues about the utility and warranty that I'm actually seeing? So all of those things, it starts getting complicated. And as you'll see in the presentation, the catalog is a tool managed by several different processes for different purposes. And it gets very complicated over time because it sits between the customer and IT. So we'll elaborate a bit more on that. So what you have to do to make the catalog practical. Having a catalog, and we talked about publishing it and maybe using databases to structure all the information in it. If I go to my next slide, we have to do this thing up here. You have to think about how am I going to publish it and get it into my my client hands or customer hands. So this is the same diagram as before. We have all of our catalog containing all of our different core business services and all of that good information which may be coming out of some type of database system or something to house all that data. And then we have to go and figure out, well, what's the user interface to get this? Today, most companies would choose a website and trying to link that information into a searchable section of our internal or external web page. You may decide to publish it as part of a book or PDF file. There's a whole bunch of different things, but the main thing is if it's customer facing, put it in a nice, easy to use format that the customer is able to use. So when we start talking about what is a service catalog, there's two things. It's a tool, and the tool has to be published, and that may use another tool. And then there's back-end processes, starting with portfolio management, and we'll talk more about service catalog management, that will help you to do the building and the publishing of the service catalog. So from a process point of view, the service catalog management process, they're focused on making sure we have a good operational and published catalog. And if you think of that as being a website and all the maintenance, so we have a defined process, at least the way that I like to look at ITIL. We have a defined process that's focused on, I'm just going to focus on getting this website up and running, showing the service catalog, keeping that catalog accurate, and making sure customers are able to use it with correct logins if I need that type of security or not. So service catalog management is a process. It focuses on running and delivering and keeping accurate the published service catalog. Whereas the way I see the service portfolio management process itself, that one is focused over here on the strategic decisions of saying, what are the services that I think will appeal and can be managed well for my end users, for the IT business itself, and what strategic decisions will I make about how am I going to store all this information? Word document, spreadsheet, database, whatever you want to choose, right? That's going to have a huge impact on what you can publish up here. So to expand upon this a bit more, so the bullet points here just, again, reiterates the fact that the catalog is supporting our customers for more than one service. And this next one, I've got a little addition to my slide. So when there's more than one customer or business being served, ITIL advises there might be more than one unique view of the service catalog for each customer. So your solution may suddenly become something like this. Now anyone who knows about databases and different versions of publishing documents will know that we've just complicated things. But in the ITIL view of a service catalog, and depending upon how mature your organization is and wants to get to with the service catalog, this is a good solution. And if I think about a practical example, think about someone, I'll write on here, marketing. All right, so we've got someone in marketing, and they only care about Salesforce.com, the Microsoft Office suite, and maybe 2 other products. They don't want to see everything in the catalog. So you want to try and figure out, well, okay, how are we going to filter it for them and make it practical? Because if it's not practical and it's not filtered, they'll never use the catalog. And in which case, why are we spending time, money, and effort publishing it? So it's actually a very critical and logical function. You want to try and think about different versions of the published catalog, and really it's a filter, right? We have different filters when people are searching, or search criteria. If I'm thinking of a web-based approach, so type in which group of services you're looking for. You type in marketing, and then it'll bring up this slice of the view of that complicated catalog. So now we're dealing with, the catalog as being the published tool on top of some type of strategic decision of a database or some other type of technology, separate from the processes that decide what goes into it. Right? And it gets quite complicated, and it's summer and it's complicated. So we're going to complicate it one step further. What else can we do with the service catalog? From an ITIL point of view and from a practical point of view. So what we're looking at on the screen right now, it's probably messy, so I'll clear out the annotations. So we're looking at basically the business view. The business wants to see a nice set of published versions of services that they're interested in. That way it's nice and easy and they can see what they're looking at and make decisions. It sits on top of these core structures that for now we'll just say it's a database for sure. And then wouldn't it be good if when people are calling in to order a service or get support for a service, we in IT would know details of the catalog, but would also know a bit further down, who do we escalate things to should we need support, and who are the owners of the service, and a lot more technical detail that my customers don't want to know, but I do. So in my next screen here, I'm taking the same view, but this time we're going to drill down in the opposite direction.
Hey, Graham, just before you move ahead, it's John. We did have a question.
Sure.
Maybe going back to something you said previously, but the question is, how important is it for the customers to play an active role in the creation and updating of the service catalog?
It's very critical. So I'm thinking of this not from an IT perspective. I'm putting on my business hat. The more you involve your customers, the better it is. You don't let your customers have everything they want, because sometimes they want too much. But the more you can involve them in doing reviews and evaluations of the services they have, and doing it through your catalog. What services do you find useful in the catalog? What do you find is missing, and so on. If you get people using it, that's a great sign. And if you get them trying to evaluate from a business perspective, what are we missing, or what don't we need because it's not really that strategic, it's a critical part of the catalog. And this goes back to, in a minute I'll go back to the life cycle diagram. We've so far identified just 2 places that really focus on the service catalog, but I'm kind of jumping ahead. There is more. So that question is a great question, and it's where we're headed. You want to get people using that catalog, and you want to put it into the hands of your customers and a few other areas to really drive an understanding of your customers and get a good interaction between them. So I think, let me just look ahead in my slides a little bit. Yeah, we'll kind of jump there at the end just to kind of expand and say, so what other processes are using the catalog and make a big difference. But we'll keep that in our hand for the minute, and we'll kind of go backwards and we'll go back up to the top.
Great,
so anyway,
thanks.
Great question though. So again, we're moving away from the customer side for a minute, just looking at the technical view here. And so from the ITIL terminology and just from a concept point of view, there's a lot of things that relate to a service that is shown in our catalog that my users want to see, or sorry, don't want to see, but my technical people do. And so in this part of the slide, here's where, from the ITIL terminology, we have technical supporting services. And from there, we could drill down, if I draw arrows, even further. So I won't get into any more complicated a diagram, but what's happening is that when you define your core business services, these are the things that the customers see and want to see, and which we from IT and the service desk, we need to know. This is the top point of the pyramid about what we're delivering and what my customers are using. And then we start, from a technical side, we start going down and saying, okay, well, for this particular core business service, it's going to use this particular technical service, something to do with the network or some other type of exchange server. Again, my customers don't want to see that, but I need to know that, because should something come up around a failure in a service for support reasons or for evaluating criticality of equipment when trying to plan event management, you need to know how everything rolls up to the top of the pyramid. So the core business service over here that I'm circling, that's the top of the pyramid. Then it expands down into multiple supporting services. We can start identifying our technical teams who support those pieces, and it gets nice and complicated, which is exactly what ITIL is. That's what the big challenge is when you start adopting an ITIL approach or any approach, and you start trying to put into place these different pieces. So to elaborate just a little bit on that kind of complexity, and let me see here. that kind of approach. Let me go to the next slide. So here's what we end up kind of getting in terms of our diagrams. And here's where I'll mention, if you're thinking of a service catalog, think of a database, because I really, as you start advancing things down the road, I really can't see how you can do it any other way, and I haven't seen approaches that have done any great job doing it another way. So the core services are the top of the pyramid, and you'll see in order to structure these different filters or views to be specific for each of my customers, look at all the different relationships down here. Right? I can mix and match my different services. They can be used in multiple places or just one place. That's a complex set of relationships. Whenever you're doing something, offering a packaged solution to someone, it's going to get complicated. Even more complicated down here, all those core business services are supported by one or more technical services, and then we could even go further, right? And we won't have a diagram for that because that would get too messy. But underneath here, we're basically connecting to the rest of the configuration of our IT infrastructure. So what
Graham,
else
we have
is
a question.
Involved? Yeah, question's great.
Sure. So I think this is the right point. Is the assumption that users would reference the service catalog versus calling the service desk?
That would be an excellent result of a service catalog. Again, if it's not usable, it's not practical. And if you follow the belief that these could be published websites, that's a lot of investment for something that might not be used. So it goes back to where does the service catalog really live? The service catalog is really managed and structured within the portfolio management process. At least in my interpretation and the way I do things within the ITIL framework, it's a strategic decision. And then part of a strategic decision is how do we justify building some type of solution, and what are we trying to get in return? So from a business point of view, we definitely should have users trying to go to the service catalog. It depends on what they're doing. If they're just trying to look up certain information about a service or what's available, that's a good option. If they're trying to get support, well, eventually they're going to come to our service desk anyway. So, unless you got a lot of self-help up on another developed project on the website, it starts to add up. So I guess my answer would be, it's the MBA answer. It depends. You need to have a strategic plan about what you're trying to accomplish with your service catalog. And that'll tell you how much time and effort do I want to go and put into this published element of it. Maybe, and here's a good discussion, maybe I don't want to do that at all. From a business point of view, we don't have a good business case for that. So we've sort of, if this is option A and we've scratched it out, this would be your option B. So do you want to go the other way? Do you want to take your service catalog and define some core business services, and do you want to focus on drilling it down? This is basically connected to the CMDB. All right, because if you look at a configuration diagram and what it's trying to accomplish, it's just this. It's trying to define records of service and all of the supporting components, and it rolls it back up. So I guess there is a C option, not having a catalog at all. I would suggest not going that route. You should definitely know what you're delivering and managing within IT. Otherwise, you end up typically managing everything and you're overwhelmed. But again, good thoughts and good questions. So should a user use the service catalog? If you've got a strategic plan to drive them there for some proper reason, then yes, they should be using it. If you're just putting it there for informational purposes only and you don't really intend people to use it, then you wouldn't want to go to a really expensive solution. You'd want to do something very, very simple to meet what the requirements of what you're trying to do. So let me go a little bit or back in slides here, and let's just have a discussion about sort of where we can get some more direction then about what am I trying to accomplish and what is the service catalog, there's really a multiple set of processes, in my opinion, that need to come into play. So here we are back at the beginning, and we have service portfolio management. In my opinion, it's the one that's managing and strategizing on here's what needs to go into our catalog. And it can use input from strategy management, and another huge input is business relationship management. So I would suggest you should always have a catalog for the reasons of if you have a business relationship person over here, and they're representing a bunch of services to the business, well, they might have just a bunch of spreadsheets or something, but they've got a list of things that they know their business customers are using. And every time they have a conversation with their customers, they talk about what's in that list. So that is a service catalog. And business relationship management works very tightly and closely with portfolio management, because they keep on bringing back from the business to IT, here's what our customers are thinking, and here's the service catalog I'm managing with them. Right? So at the very basics, a service catalog exists in your organization somewhere, because it's impossible to have a conversation with the business without in some way referring to an IT service. Now, you may be calling applications IT services. I won't say it's right or wrong. That's your approach. Or you may do the more complicated thing, and you say, well, here's an application with these support issues and stuff, and you get a proper service description. But the whole point here is that business relationship management has a total investment in the service catalog from the customer perspective. They want to be able to make sure they go there and they understand what they can tell the customer to expect from utility and warranty, and how to order the service, and how to get support. So here's where, again, you can build a business case. If your published service catalog has that information and can be filtered for the business and the business relationship manager, then that's great. They can use a defined document to do their work. So there's another place, too, that really focuses a lot on the catalog. And so now this is over here in service level management. So service level management is the one who takes whatever strategy comes out from this side of things and says, okay, well, we need to come up with an IT solution that will meet those utility and warranty requirements, and it sends it through the whole development life cycle. So at the same time, they'll be working with service catalog management to say, well, here's the specifics of details that you might want to publish in your catalog. So there's probably other areas I could circle here as well, but to me, the 4 areas that are totally involved with the service catalog, on the strategy side is service portfolio management. They're the ones making the strategic decisions about what goes in, how we're going to do things to publish it in both a business and technical direction, and they're critically linked for input from business relationship management. So then from the IT side, once you decide to publish or in any way make available information in a service catalog, the service catalog management process as a process, the way I interpret it and like to think of it, that's the process that worries about, I've got to publish the catalog, and I'm getting my information and direction from the portfolio management process. And as the solution gets built up, I'm getting information to put into that catalog from service level management, which has more details about how a service is actually going to be delivered. So strategy is always high level. They don't have all the details. They just have the big picture. Service level management will get the details, and both of those work together, portfolio and service level management, to help service catalog management populate the service catalog with the right details and keep it accurate. And then we go back to strategy to evaluate it, to say, how is it properly helping my business, and is it working the way it should? So that's kind of the big picture of the service catalog itself. It's not an easy thing once you get into it, because Again, a lot of people try to make all of those strategic decisions. Again, I'm going to clean this up. So a lot of people try to make those, at least companies I've seen, they try and make strategic decisions by saying, well, let's have a catalog management process, or let's make it part of service level management, as if service level management's not busy enough. And then they say, you figure out what needs to go into the catalog and how you're going to publish it, but it's a random decision that doesn't make sense. You need to know what you're trying to accomplish. And so what you need is again, this link over here. You need a strategic objective saying, here's what our catalog needs to accomplish. The more we want to accomplish, the more we need some back-end. You're creating an IT service itself. The catalog as a tool becomes an IT service. So your strategic decisions will say how much investment is required in order to build that IT solution to deliver the service catalog, and it's justified by whichever type of business objective you're trying to achieve. So I've left it kind of wide open as a bit of a more discussion today than anything else. But I don't know if there's any. Where's our final slide here? I don't know if there's any questions or comments that have come in, John, or if you have any thoughts you want to sort of pass along as well, because you've definitely seen different service catalog efforts and implementations as well.
Yeah, certainly we've seen our share together. There aren't any other questions at the moment from the participants, but we'll give them another minute. The one thing I think, Graham, that might be worth expanding on just a little bit, in actual fact, in your experience, have you seen organizations that really differentiate clearly between the service portfolio and the service catalog? What's your experience in terms of what most people do, if they do any of those things at all?
Yeah, well, there's two levels to that. Distinguishing between the portfolio and the catalog, to me, I just look at, I'm going to go back to slide 3 here. So there we go. So, the overall portfolio is these 3 pieces. I really don't see people managing it, at least in the companies I've come across, as being a single entity. So when they're making strategic decisions, and that would be in the diagram here considered up in the pipeline, those aren't really entered into a database. They're more strategic decisions made on paper and so on. And people don't typically, in any of my experience, keep the retired section. So when people start talking about the portfolio and the catalog, they just talk about this one thing. We need to have a depository for all of our services, and that way we have a customer-facing list, and IT can refer to this customer-facing list whenever they need something. The whole concept of the portfolio is that, if the diagrams were better, the catalog itself is really just going to drill down to be a part of the configuration management system, which doesn't mean you have to have this massive enterprise-wide tool set, but everything you should be doing from an IT perspective, and especially an ITIL framework, needs to roll up to say, how is it impacting all of my services and the service catalog and those core services in the middle. That's what my customers are using, and that's what I need to be aware of if I'm doing a new development in the release area, or I'm doing a change and I need to evaluate the impact. I need to be able to trace everything back up to the top end of the service catalog. So I'm not sure if that sort of clarifies it, but
Great.
It's really the same thing in practical jargon. People refer to the portfolio and the catalog as the same thing.
Okay, good. That's kind of what I was thinking too. We do have a couple of questions. From Crystal, do you have an example of a service catalog structured document?
We do have something up on the ThoughtRock website. Top of mind, I can't remember where it is, but we have a section for templates. And it's more of a concept document. It's a template just giving the idea that, along with the service level agreements, when you're trying to define your services and your service level agreements, at that time you should be saying which elements should be going into my service catalog. and that way it saves doing the job twice. Of course, it depends on what, if you've defined service level agreements. But anyway, there's something there, and that's sort of the approach, is that when you're defining services, start coming up with a template about here's things which are of interest to a customer without overdoing it. You don't want too much information in there.
Right. Okay. Another question from Carol. It ties just into your comment, I think. You mentioned a lot of people try to make strategic decisions by trying to make service catalog management part of service level management. So, should service catalog management be separate from SLM? And should an organization have the same people in charge of both service catalog and service level management? Great question, Carol.
Yeah. Again, my take on that is that service catalog management is nice and clean when it's just focused on running the service catalog and keeping it accurate. And ITIL doesn't have any rules. It doesn't give you any guidance on what you can do. I like it, though, being separate because again, there's two parts to a service catalog. One is making the decisions of what goes into it and how it's structured and how you build it. And the other is it's actually a service, right? It's one of my services I'm delivering to my customers as well as my internal IT people that, if ever you need to figure out what we're offering to the customers and how it connects to other pieces, we've got either a web solution or some other type of solution. So, if your service catalog has gone to that level, if you've got a website and you're maintaining that website, you have a development team that might be doing it, whatever it might be, it'd be good to have that as a separate defined service catalog process. If you're not mature with your service catalog, then you might make a good business case to say, well, let's tuck it into service level management because it won't overwhelm them because we're not doing much. We're just going to put the service name in there and a couple of items, and it doesn't take any time and effort, and we're just going to publish it in a document or something. Okay, so I still prefer, though, a separate.
Yeah, the analogy I think I would use. Yeah, the analogy I think I would use, Graham, is maybe a restaurant. We do a lot of work in the restaurant industry, and if you're Sally's Diner, Sally sets the menu and determines what's going to be on the menu, and Sally maybe cooks and serves the food, or at least serves the food. So that's the service catalog and the service level management. But as you get into larger organizations, there are lots of advantages to having the definition of the services to be provided separated from the group of people who's responsible for how well they're provided, because there's a natural what I would call a positive tension between those two things that keeps you more in touch with your customers. We do have another question. Second question, or maybe a third question from Crystal. Can you speak more about how the service catalog interfaces with the service desk?
Again, different companies have different solutions. The way I just see it generically, this is ongoing. It's a part of every single call that comes into your service desk. So the first thing you do, you may not see it, but the first thing you do when a customer is calling in, you're searching your service catalog to figure out, where does this call fit within my services? What is the customer calling about? So on our desktop, service desk tools, you're entering in different fields, and in a technical solution, what you're actually doing is one of those fields is going to select the service that the customer is calling for, and then from that, it depends on how much you've built up your service desk tool, but then all your business rules pop up based upon here's the customer and here's the service that's being called into, and here's what we've defined as offerings in our service catalog, so our service desk agents are aware of it. And on a technical basis, should we have to go back into IT and get some support, we know the path and the escalations in order to get there. So my opinion, and John, you can add yours too, but to me it's built in as part of, when you define your service catalog, it becomes part of solutions throughout your ITSM solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, to use maybe a small but pertinent example, through ThoughtRock we offer the ITIL bundle where people purchase the online course and exam, and we offer 24/7 support for those customers. Super important for our service desk internally to understand what's in that service catalog, what is being provided, and it ties clearly to the service desk and to service level management. So as you can imagine, from a lot of people have interesting comments to make about the curriculum. Either wild praise or this is the worst course I've ever taken and everything in between. And it's important for the service desk to know, A, what that service is, and then B, what are the services that they provide with respect to that offering, and what happens if somebody calls with a question that's outside of that boundary. Is there an escalation or a referral or whatever? So that's a small example, but it definitely has to be integrated into both the service desk and the service level management component. And over the last few years, I think that's why we've seen in the industry a lot of consolidation from SLM technology providers, right, or ITSM technology providers. So you're seeing more blended and integrated suites of applications just for those reasons. We do have another question, Graham, mindful of the time. It's 12:49. Everybody's still listening in, so hopefully they're finding this valuable. Feel free to post more questions if you want. The last one for the moment I have is, it's kind of an interesting one. Is a poorly written service catalog better than no service catalog at all?
Yes. I think, again,
that's the short answer.
Yeah, you need to get a handle on what are you doing. And again, you have to know the management environment, what's going on in your organization. But yeah, you need somewhere out there to understand what's going on. And having a poorly written Word document is a start, right? And from that point, again, I can't speak enough about going back here. The reason that there's a strategy dot in the middle of the ITIL life cycle is because then you can start to make decisions, right? Strategy is all about decisions. If you have even a rough handwritten version of all the services you have, now at least you say, here's what we're doing that we know of, and what decisions can and should we make with what we have. So everyone's got a different perspective on on how they would approach ITIL and come up with a roadmap. I'm very solid and strong on the service catalog, even having a rough handwritten version, because until you know exactly what it is you're managing and delivering to your customers and the back end trying to support, you end up trying to do everything at 100%, and we just can't split ourselves that far. You really have to get a handle on what are my priorities, and the service catalog is the way to do it. So that's just my 2 cents. Any more
great.
questions?
And based on my experiences in working with organizations, I would say that's yep. Here comes one. Just a quick comment from me. Based on my experience, I would say most CIOs would say the same thing. Don't try to boil the ocean. Just put something in Excel at least, and let's all get on the same page about what it is that we're offering to the customers. So if that's the definition of poorly written, then I would agree 100% yes. Another question, how is a service catalog different from a knowledge base, or is it one and the same?
Well, a knowledge base is just is too broad scope. It's about capturing knowledge in a whole bunch of different places. You can attach, again with technology, you can attach knowledge bases to a service catalog and try and provide one that way. But the service catalog is very straightforward. It's the definition of here's the services that we're managing and offering to our business, and adding a knowledge base on top of that. You still need the service catalog, and then the knowledge base would be sort of attaching and supporting it. So I really don't see them as being the same thing really in any way. The catalog to me needs to be defined separately and managed for a different purpose.
Great. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Graham. I think great presentation and lots of dynamic interaction and questions. And for those of you listening in, interesting to know that everybody hung in there for the entire presentation, so hopefully it was engaging and added value for everyone.